as I mentioned, currently I work for Elastic. It's an open source company where I'm in charge, and by in charge I mean I'm the only person who works on the Python driver. So if you ever need to use Elasticsearch through Python, you should probably use my libraries. If not, then we should have a talk. And that's what I was hired for. And we'll get to that. That's sort of the end of the story. This is the teaser trailer. That I was hired to work on an open source libraries, and also to spread the word about Elasticsearch amongst the Python folk, which is good news, because that means I get to travel to PyCons all over the world. So thank you very much for having me again. So let's start our journey at the very beginning. That was my first job. I was working for a large company, for a large enterprise company back in Prague, Czech Republic, and it was great. I was still studying. We'll get to that part later, and I was so amazed at what computers could do. It was a little bit a while ago, so I was really surprised that there is a tool out there that can process huge amounts of data. It was like 5 terabytes or something like that. I thought I would never see a data set that large ever again. No? Okay, I'm just old. That's okay. So I was really impressed with all the technologies, but I was a little frustrated because there were some awesome tools around. Awesome mainframe servers that cost more than the apartment building I was actually living in. Not just my apartment, but the entire building. There were software that cost nearly as much. Software that I couldn't even find online that it exists, because the maker of the software just didn't bother to advertise, because their policy was, if you're big enough to need us, you know about us. And that was a little bizarre to me. Like, how do people work like this? So these were some of the tools that we used. But the primary thing why I put this here is, it was the epitome of enterprise software and hardware. The big iron, the big expensive servers running a commercial operating system. At that time, enterprise meant a proper Unix operating system, none of these fancy Linux things that kids like these days. And it was glorious. Like, it was the first time that I've seen a physical hardware machine partitioned into many different virtual machines. And you could even do it at runtime. You could take a CPU from one VM and plug it into another. I love how this doesn't surprise you at all. Like, back when this was happening to me at 10, 15 years ago, I was like, wow, that's really possible? Like, what? Why would anybody ever need that? Why would anybody ever want that? And how is that possible in the first place? No, nothing surprises you. Oh well. But I was working on these systems, and I thought that that's the norm. This is how programming is. This is what my life is going to be. I'm going to be locked somewhere in a basement working on a system that, first of all, I'll never see, because it was in some data center somewhere. Well, that part never changed. And also a system that nobody really understood. There was the vendor that obviously understood it, and they charged heavily for any gleam into their secrets. But if I tried to Google anything, well, Google was just starting, but if I tried to search for something, then there was nothing. And not just because Stack Overflow wasn't invented yet, but because generally people didn't share this knowledge, because that was the precious commodity. Besides, the millions of dollars that you had to pay for software licenses. But that was the precious commodity, because those were some great opportunities for the people who worked with it. both on the technical side that I described, like the ability to remove a CPU from one VM and move it into another. I'll probably mention like a bunch of more times because I still cannot get over it, and also over the fact that you just don't care. But also from the financial or personal position, because I was an intern at this company. I was actually cheaper for them than the cleaning lady that cleaned our offices. And that meant two things. First of all, nobody cared what I did. Like, if I wanted to waste 2 weeks of my time to investigate this new exciting feature, they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. If it turns out that there's something useful there, we can use it. You can then show us, and we can use it. It also meant that after I've done my chores, I've been through my personal hell trying to debug something that nobody ever understood and nobody ever saw. The world was my oyster, because at that point nobody else understood the system. Because I was this super cheap junior intern and could spend weeks trying to figure out everything about this system, I knew it very well. And that was a new system. Nobody else in the world knew what I did. That is a scary, scary thought. That like one of the experts on that system outside of the vendor is like an 18-year-old kid just poking with a toothpick. Like, I wonder what this button does. And that's how I learned. And with that, I was also able to, once I left this company, because I wanted to be paid at least as the lady serving lunch in the cafeteria, and that didn't work out. So I said, "Why? I'll just leave," and I was able to become a consultant. I was the youngest consultant out there. I was about 19, 20. I would show up at a company and they would, "What? Huh? You? Okay." And it was great. I was paid lots of money, and I was the foremost expert at this one tiny thing. But it didn't feel right to me, because it was all artificial. Like, I wasn't that smart. I still am not. But it was just the artificial scarcity, the fact that there was no resources out there, that there was no other people to talk to. Like, I always, whenever I went to, I tried to talk to the other engineers. Like, so what are you doing, and how are you doing it? And I typically got one of two answers. The most typical one was, I don't really know. Like, somebody else created this schema for us, this way how we work, and I just follow it. I go from A to B to C to D, and then I get my paycheck. Or I was like, oh, I'm not going to tell you. Like, I came up with the A to B to C to D into the paycheck, and that's my only value for this company. They weren't quite so honest, but that's sort of my interpretation of what they typically said. And that was super scary to me. This feeling of little power, that someone else is in control, that I didn't earn to be there. I was just at the right time, at the right place, for the right price, and I got to learn all this stuff. But I wasn't in control. I couldn't choose my clients because there were only so many companies who used this set of tools. And if I wanted to introduce it to another company, it wasn't the engineers who decided which tools we were going to use. This was all, oh wow. This was all a business decision, because vast amounts of money were involved, and it was always sold at the C-level executives. Some people went to have a cigar and a cognac and decided which software to buy. At least that's how I imagined it, and I still do. But it was never the engineers. Somebody always came up, oh, we bought this great new shiny things. These are all the things that it can do. I know it because the sales guy told me. Here, Figure it out. Awesome. Also, these skills were not transferable. I was an expert, and sure, I'm overplaying it a little bit because, you know, I'm up here and nobody will correct me. But those skills were not transferable. If I wanted to do something else, like, I would have to start from scratch. And also, if somebody asked me, so how does this compare to the competitors' tools? I said, I don't know. Never seen it. Like, I've only seen this one thing. It's good. I can tell you what it can do. I might be able to tell you what it cannot do, though, like, you can never be sure. You can never prove a negative. So, this is good. You should pay me. That was essentially always the conversation. But the idea that I would want to move somewhere else and do something else was scary because I was comfortable here, and I perfectly understand how people stay in the same area, in the same ecosystem for such a long time, because it was very hard for me to leave. Fortunately, at that time, I was still at school, trying to get my master's degree. Since then, fortunately, I've stopped trying, so now I'm much happier. But the school was an interesting sort of counterpoint to the enterprise world, because it covered both. It covered both of course, the theory, but, you know, who cares about theory? But also all the different tools that are out there, all the different programming languages, etc. You know, it was a proper computer science school, so I had to learn Lisp and Scheme and Haskell, and all that cool stuff that are now finally cool again. But I also got to take courses on Java that was not open source back then, and administrating of the Oracle database, or programming in C#. That was the brand new thing. So it was a mix of both worlds where I could do them both. And there was a stark contrast between how these two ecosystems worked. The first thing that amazed me was the complete divide between those two groups of technologies, groups of people, groups of teachers. They barely talk to each other. It was so polarizing. Like, either you're an open source at that point. It was more like a Unix, Linux guy, or you're the enterprise guy. That was all about the commercial Unices and databases, and Microsoft was a big, bad, ugly corporation back then. Now we have Apple, so we can hate on someone else, but at that point it was Microsoft who was that evil. So it was very interesting, these two different divides. And also the way that you worked with them and you learned the two different technologies. With the open source, like, if I had to do something with shell scripting, the hardest one was to Google something that would work on shell as an SH and not only in bash. That was the largest challenge, and that's, as challenges go, that's fairly okay. And especially when this is theoretically should have been a master level education. But for proprietary, the biggest obstacle was, okay, so how do I get access to this thing? And okay, so I can get the license number from school because, you know, the companies want me to use this, so they give it to the school for free, but then how do I install it? And I remember to this day that my homework from C# Windows programming, I spent like 90% of the time trying to install Visual Studio and get it to work. Like, with all the licensing and all the weird issues. And then I finally understand why the homework seemed so trivial in the beginning. Because looking back, it almost seems like the homework was like, are you willing to put up with this? Like, if yes, you can pass the class. Like, are you willing to go through the pain to install this? And by now, I hope that you've observed that I'm exaggerating like crazy during this entire talk. So don't take me on my word. It's just the spirit of the thing. I don't want to get in trouble. But when I was oscillating between these two worlds, you know, the world of cool toys that are super difficult to start, and the pieces lying everywhere that you can connect in any kind of way, I discovered one glorious thing: Python. So that was my first contact with Python, where I was for many of the classes we had some assignments that were programming, but nobody cared what language to use. So some people, you know, flocked to their favorite, like C#, because they already had Visual Studio installed, so 90% of the work was over, right? or Java, or something like that. And I discovered Python, this brilliantly simple language that I immediately fell in love with. And then came along one specific class, one specific project in school. And that was at our school. We had the tradition, well, the necessity and requirement, but it's much nicer when you say it as a tradition, that each student has to be part of a group project. So we had a group project, and the idea was essentially to go start to finish and create a complete product, from the design all the way to how the box should look like, because again, at that time, software was sold in boxes. Well, we didn't want to put the software in a box. We said, hey, there is this new thing called the web, so let's do some web application. And so I started looking around for how to use Python for web development, and there was this brand new thing called Django. So based on this description, you know that this is the only thing that I said it's true. Like, web was old at that point. It was a tired old thing. It wasn't a fancy new thing. Django, however, was brand new. That was, how many of you here remember the words magic removal in Django? We got a few people in the back. So yeah, so this was pre-magic removal, and so at that point Django was still magical. That's one way to put it. Let's stick with that one. So it was magical. It was this glorious world of ponies and rainbows, and I fell in love with it. And because I was learning Python at the same time, I picked up a lot of my habits from the Django code. Mostly good ones. Does anybody remember doc tests, or anybody still write doc tests? So at that point, the Django entire test suite was essentially a few files of like 5,000 or 10,000 lines of doc tests. And of course, like, if you got a failure somewhere in there, like, there was no helping you. Like, it was just, you just had to figure it out. The tests were there essentially just saying yay or nay. Like, there was no additional information coming out of the test suite. But I was immediately captivated, and I wasn't captivated just by the technical aspect of things, because I soon learned that it's obviously not perfect. There are things that are missing, things that I would like to have there. So I thought, hey, Django has this one great thing going for it. You know, it's in Python, which means one very important thing. Anybody who uses Django has the potential to contribute to Django. That's not very common for software in general, and not even for open source software. Like, I use so many pieces of open source software that I have absolutely no ability to contribute to. Like the Linux kernel. Like, I don't want to learn C just so that I can fix my sound card. Like that will never happen, at least for me. There are people for those it will happen and they're awesome, but not for me. The same for Firefox or other things. But with Django I could. So I created my first patch. I was like, I want this new shiny thing, this new feature. It's a small thing. I just summoned it to track, and that was actually 10 years ago. Next month, and it got accepted. And the people were really nice about it too. That was surprising. Like there are these badass maintainers of this awesome project, and they talked to me. They asked me questions about why I want this feature and what it should do, and looked at my code and said it's mostly okay. I was mostly happy with that, and so they merged it. And I was happy. I was ecstatic. I was obnoxious. I talked to everybody about Django and how great it is, and I have a patch in Django. and that was great. And my obnoxiousness led to several things. First of all, somebody told me that I'm obnoxious, so I cannot say I fixed it because you cannot ever judge for yourself. I still get it from time to time, so I wasn't 100% successful. But it also led to a friend asking me if I could come over to the company that it works for and talk to them a little bit about Django. Because I cannot shut up about it, so at least it would have some purpose behind it. And this was a company in Prague, one of the major web companies. The nice thing about web companies or web development in Prague, in Czech Republic, is you don't have any kind of scaling issues or whatsoever. No matter how successful you are, you will never have more than 10 million users. It's just not physically possible. So to this day, there's a lot of very old school development using PHP and MySQL and everything like that, and it works. It's fine. But this particular company was looking to upgrade. Looking like what's the next step for us. And then they had this employee and said, hey, my friend cannot shut up about Django. Why don't we talk to him? Maybe there is something there. So I went there. I talked to them about Django and primarily about Python and how great it is and how elegant it is and how not PHP it is. And they liked it. So they asked me to create a one-day workshop, to essentially help them run through the tutorial so they can judge for themselves. That was my first sign that there is something different in this world. I didn't go into any room to smoke cigars and drink cognac to sell them Django. I actually had to talk to the engineers. That was good. That was fun. So I managed to create a workshop for them, and by create the workshop, I downloaded the Django tutorial. I ran through it with the group of engineers, and they liked it. And not only because I also brought beer. So that was good. And so they decided, let's give it a try. We have a new project coming on, and we need a CMS. That's not a problem. We have a CMS. The problem is we have 5. So let's do the classic thing. Let's solve this. Let's create one CMS to unite them all. So they wanted to create the 6th one, and actually using Python and Django. And they wanted to hire me to help them. So I said, cool. Working with Python, I'm in. I have only one condition. I want this to be open source. And they said, interesting. Why not? And I was completely fascinated by that. Because why not? What do you mean? You're a web company and you're creating web tools for free so that other people can use it. And the guy just explained to me, yeah, but that's not what we sell. That's not how we make money. We don't make money off of the technology. We make money off of our products, off of the websites that we have, off of the content, and ultimately of the salespeople that are going around into closed rooms with cigars and cognac and try to sell advertisement. I really stereotype salespeople really badly. I apologize. Once we started developing this, I had to switch a little bit, because at that point I was still used to, from my previous job, to all these enterprise tools. Like, I couldn't imagine that there is a better or database than Oracle, or even anything that could stand in the same room as it. And now that was simply not an option. Like, you're not going to buy Oracle license to run a CMS. Well, some people do, but most people don't. And I was fascinated by this difference. What I characterize it as the platform versus the product. When you use the enterprise software, the tools, those are products. You buy them, you get the box, virtual or otherwise, you put it somewhere and you use it. With open source, it's often the case that you have components all over the world that you have to somehow download, put together, and they'll, if you're very lucky, they'll fit, and they'll give you a platform that you can work with. But you have to do a lot of the building, a lot of the integration yourself. Other way to refer to this is the buy versus build thing. And this is obviously not true for any open source project or any commercial project, etc. But for a lot of them, it is that way. That you always have an option, like buy the ready-made box that does 90% of what you want out of the box, or download all these different parts, fit them in together as you wish, and it will do 125% of what you don't want, but hopefully also most of the things that you do want. All you have to do is, recompile your kernel, download all these things, figure out how to build them, how to make them work in the same environment, etc., etc., etc. Just spend a lot of time and become an expert. And usually this is easier because there were other people experiencing the same pain before you, and typically they're willing to share, and that was great, because we instead of just using one technology or one polished product, we were using things from all over. This is just the tiniest selection. This was just the very core that we used. And there is obviously nothing surprising here. We use Django and Postgres. Then we had to use Redis to speed things up, because even 10 million users can sometimes do some things. But it worked out. And if it didn't, we had an IRC full of Django nodes who've already been through the same issues. Or if not, they've been through other problems that might relate, and just talking to them actually helped a lot. And not only did it help as in we got where we needed to be, but it also helped in we learned a lot, not only about these technologies, but about technology in general and about web in general. At that point, well, to this day, I still don't understand really how HTML and JavaScript works, but I learned a lot about how the backend works and how do you structure your data, etc. So that was awesome. We were constantly communicating with this community of people that lived in the IRC channel. And the ticket issues and all of the other stuff, and they were great. And we tried to give back. We tried to help as well, until one day we realized we talk to these people a lot. They seem to know what they're doing. We should probably get to meet them. We should probably, take our relationship to the next level, so to speak. We should go to a conference or something. and learn from them and share our experiences and get to know the people in person, because community is nothing but people. So at that time when we decided this, that meant PyCon, because that was the closest conference and also the most awesome one. So we all went to, our entire team, we went to Chicago to meet everyone, and it was great. We found out that really the names on IRC belong to actual people. That was a huge relief. At some point I was really unsure, because some people were there all the time. I was just wondering, like, are they real people? Well, yes, they were, and they were lovely. And we learned a lot of things. We went to a bunch of talks, but they weren't that interesting. Well, they were, but the most interesting was actually talking to the people. We found, on the very first day, we found 10 people who did the exact same thing that we did, and ran into the same issues that we did, and solved it exactly the same way. So we realized, standing there like with this other team, that if we talked to each other 2 months ago, we would have collectively saved at least 40 hours of head wall banging, and that was interesting. What was even more interesting is when the conference ended and we stayed over in Chicago and we went to the sprints, and we actually got to work with the people and help them a little bit, but mostly just really get to know the core Django community much better. And it changed things drastically, because ever since then, whenever we had an issue with Django or something like that, I didn't have to explain a lot of the stuff. I just said, this is what there is, and people knew me. They remembered me from the sprints that I worked with them. I talked with them, and I was making half a sense. So maybe there's something to what I'm saying. I'm not sure how I feel about this, because technically we should, not look at our personal relationship when we see a ticket in a ticketing system or something like that. But we are still just human, and if I see a ticket from someone I know, I have much more information. I have all the context that I otherwise wouldn't have. So in my own practice, I try to treat everybody differently, but of course that's a myth. I'm a human, and I'm not capable of being objective. I don't want to be objective. I'm a human. I'm kind of proud of that, mostly because I don't know what else to be. But it was interesting, and it was important, because as web development companies go, this one went the same direction. So I was looking for a job, and this one guy from the Django community from the US just tweeted, "Hey, my last employer is looking for someone to replace me." I said, "Well, maybe I can help." And we knew each other. He introduced me. It was a time for another PyCon. Everything cool happens at a PyCon. It used to be at the PyCon. Now it's a PyCon. That's super exciting. So I went there. I met with the team, and I got a new job at Whiskey Media at that time, which was just another company using Django to do awesome stuff. It was fun. We got to build websites about video games and comic books, and play video games and read comic books. So that was good. But what was great was this was in San Francisco, and the company really tried to be a good citizen of the open source world. So we tried to open source everything that made sense for us, and we created a bunch of tools to ease our pains. And we had this discussion every single time. Is this something specific for us or not? And if not, it was a given that we will open source it once if we have the time, because open sourcing is not just putting something out on GitHub. You need to work about it a little bit. You need to add documentation, etc. And but we always try to do the right thing in this, and that was great. That really showed me what it is to be on the other side of the open source development. Actually, someone asking me questions and sending me patches, and I realize it's hard. Not from the technical point of view, though that too, because oftentimes people have environments that you don't see and you don't have any experience with, but you need to help them solve their problem that they have with your software because you wrote it wrong in the first place, or you didn't account for all of these possibilities. That's a nicer way to put it. Let's go with that. And that was a very rewarding experience. Typically, when people say rewarding experience, they mean painful. And this was no exception. It was a little painful, but it was really great. It was really great, and it really made me fall in love with the community even more, because I got to appreciate what the people are going through. Because if I'm feeling this much agony, and I'm prone to agony, as you might have noticed, over my few tiny little projects that are typically like one module or one tiny package, imagine what it must be to maintain Python itself. Like, that must be painful, and it gives you a lot of empathy, and that led to the next thing, because I tried to get more involved. I tried to get involved in the local community. We started doing Python meetups in Prague. We'll talk about more of that later. But also, you know, as web development companies go, this one went the same direction. So I was again looking for a job, and this guy from Prague asked me, "Hey, do you want to maybe come over to our company and talk to us?" And I was first skeptical a little bit, because he was a Ruby guy. He was good, but he was a Ruby guy. We met each other at our respective meetups in Prague. We always had the Ruby meetup and the Python meetup. So at one point, the Ruby meetup invited us to talk about Django, you know, what the competition is doing. I secretly think that they wanted to have a laugh, and they did. But we did too, and it was great. It was fun. And so then when we started our meetups, we invited them, and it was a great collaboration. So now he asked me to come over. He's working for this new company. It's exciting. It's called Elasticsearch. And you probably know how this ends, right? So I said, yeah, sure, that sounds good, but what do you need? And they said, oh, we need a Python person. We don't need a person to write Python code. Well, that too, but that's not the primary purpose. We need a person who understands the Python community, who understands what's important for them, us, and because we want to be successful. And when we want to be successful in the Python community, we cannot have a Python client written by Java people. Technically, that's not a problem. Like, if you can figure out Java, Python is easy. And actually, I've seen a lot of Python Java code in that company, and it was not easy. But they really felt, because it still is a company run by developers, they thought we need to be good member of the ecosystem. When people use Elasticsearch from Python, it needs to feel like they're using it from Python, and not that they're using Java from Python. That's not a good experience. And there was the other part of it. It was like, we need someone to go to a conference, hello, and talk to people about Elasticsearch. So use Elasticsearch. That part's over. Because again, we need someone to spread the word, and we don't care. We don't want you to sell our commercial offerings. No, we want you to promote the open source if you think it makes sense. If you summon a talk, like you should go. And that was amazing to me. So I went a little crazy. I went all over the place to all the different PyCons and everything. Like place like Pune and stuff. And it was great. And I got to meet a lot of people. And they were always a little skeptical, like, hey, you're paid by Elasticsearch and you want to talk to me about Elasticsearch. Like, I get that, but like, where's the cigar? Where's the cognac? And it always took me a while to explain to them, like, I don't care. I don't have any stake in you buying our products. Like, I would be happy if you did, if you thought it makes sense for you. But that's not why I'm here. I want to make your life easier. I actually like Elasticsearch, and I thought you might too. And there's a thin line between being creepy and pushy and salesy. Again, apologize to salespeople. Like I'm terrible at stereotyping them. And being friendly and trying to promote possibilities. But I feel that Elasticsearch was always good at that. At least for me, they supported me in, like, if I said, like, I will not do this, or I will not try to push our products. Everybody was like, of course, like, that's not why you're here. And because it was truly trying to be part of the open source community. Also in the fact that when you remember talking about the platform versus product. Elasticsearch and our other products, Logstash and Kibana, they're always my go-to example for this. Because you can buy products in a box that can do a lot of the stuff much easier. You can just set them up and it works. But if you want to do anything else with them, you're kind of stuck. Elasticsearch, you can just install, play with it, and build everything to your own liking. It requires the word build, so there is some work involved, but it's actually the perfect example for the build versus buy. And this also gave me a great opportunity to try to give back to the community, because it helped me so much. The whole Python thing, I've seen it on a T-shirt somewhere recently. The quote, like, "Come for the language, stay for the community." And that's really one of my favorite quotes, because that's exactly what I've done. And I also want to be a good citizen, so I try to help. I help organize a PyCon Czech Republic. I help out with PyLadies and Django girls, being a coach. That's also a great and rewarding experience, because trying to explain concepts that are second nature to you, to someone who's never seen them before, really helps you understand where it's all coming from and what are all the different biases that we have and that we see. My favorite example there is, I love the coaches that try to teach the proper way how to program. You sit, you think, you draw, and then you write a perfect piece of code. Because that's what they think that programming should be. That's what they aspire to, and they want to teach it the right way. And they kind of forget that when when we all started, at least when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. I was copy pasting things into terminal, and if it didn't work, I tried to add +1 at the end. If that didn't work, I did -1. That typically worked. I have no idea why. And I was fine with it. I was like, okay, it works. Let's move on. And this is an experience that a lot of us lost, that we forget, or we want to spare other people the pain, the uncertainty that you did something and it works, but you don't know why, and you try to explain it to your students, and they don't get it. Of course, you didn't get it. Why do you expect something else? So it's always a great experience in this, like the feedback of, yeah, this is how you learn. Even now, when I try to learn a new library, I just install it, I copy paste an example, it works, great. Let's move on. Like I don't want to know why. Like if this is a library that I'll spend more time with, absolutely I'll invest the time. But typically I just want to get stuff done. So this is where I'm at. So what's the future? Well, I don't know. I do know some things, however. The future is open, with a pun intended. I cannot imagine myself like leaving the Python community. I can totally imagine that I will not use Python anymore. After all, I haven't used Django in years. But I still love the community. I still go back to all of their conferences, and I'm the weird guy who always shows up and doesn't use Django. Actually, that's actually not true. We have quite a few of those. It's a very sticky community. Once you're part of it, like you'll never leave. So whatever I do, I know that Python, Django, and open source will always be a huge part of it. Python and Django maybe not directly, but definitely open source. Even if I work on something that's not open source itself, I will still have a soft spot for all the open source community out there. So just a quick few resources if you yourself want to get started with open source, which hopefully I haven't deterred you from. Just two quick links. One is OpenHatch, which is a great project for when you want to get involved, and they collect projects and links and resources for beginners to get started. They will it will help you even pick your project, point to good starting points, good issues where to start, and know that those don't necessarily have to be code. A lot of open source is in other things, design, documentation, all those things that are actually super important. Oftentimes more important than the code itself. One of the strongest points of Django always was its documentation, and that's how it won a lot of people over. Another one is Open Advice. It's essentially a collection of stories from open source people and maintainers about how they got started and sort of what they wish they knew when they were starting. Now the most important resource is this weekend. There are going to be some sprints. We'll have more information on that later. But you should totally come. There'll be people there that will be willing and hopefully also able to help. If you want to get started. And finally, you notice that our time frame is shortening and shortening. So then the next resource is right now. Do you have any questions? We do have a mic. So if you have any questions. No questions? There's a question all the way there in the back. Do we have a microphone?
Yeah, no.
Shout it, I'll repeat it. Ah.
Now? Yay! Okay, so you are obviously not 18-year-old Honza anymore. But if you were suddenly...
What gave me away?
If you were suddenly 18-year-old Honza again and starting over, what would be the thing that you would poke toothpicks at and get curious about?
I think I would skip the... knowing what I know now, which is obviously unfair, I would go directly through the communities, because it's much easier, and you don't need the employer. You don't need someone to buy you this expensive thing that you can poke toothpicks at. You can start yourself, and now it's so much easier than it was back then, because we have things like Stack Overflow, and we have conferences. We have many more conferences than we had, and we have outreach programs that are awesome, that will help you, like OpenHatch as a virtual one, but also Django Girls, PyLadies. There are always initiatives that try to bring young people into open source, and that's where I would try to go, because that's how you learn. That's how you get a lot of experience working on real projects that are actually being used for real things. You can get to work on something that can be used in NASA or something crazy like that. And where else would you get this? Where else would you get this opportunity? And I hope that I also shown how you can progress from there, and what are some of the opportunities to go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question.
Is it working? Okay, nice. Can I say? Hi. This might seem like a cliche question, but the thing is, since this has been a general talk in terms of how your OSS life was, like how OSS helped you in getting to where your life where you are right now. Has there been any slight hint of imposter syndrome coming into your life at any point of this growth
every
that
time.
you had?
Every time. Thank you for this question. This is a very important question.
Okay.
Every time I went into a new project, or I started one of my own, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I can barely copy paste something and have it work. And even when it works, I don't understand it. And there are all these people who, you know, I just start asking my question, and they said, oh yeah, -1. And like, how do they know? And every single time, every single new project, every single old project too, actually, there's always someone smarter than you. And that is a real problem that you just have to work through. There are great resources online how to deal with imposter syndrome. Usually you just have to power through and remember what is the thing that you felt like this, and then you got over it. My best example of how to deal with imposter syndrome is, especially when talking to non-technical people, is driving. I remember when I learned to drive, and you know, I'm from Europe, so that was manual transmission. I had to concentrate really hard just to get the car moving, and it was very hard. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like, this cannot be this hard. I must be doing something wrong. And now, if I want to relax, I sit in my car and I go for a drive, and I can talk to people, and I can think about stuff, etc. And the driving is completely automatic. And this is an experience that a lot of people have. And it's exactly the same with everything else. Like, I expect that brain surgeons will disagree, but at some point it just becomes easier, and typically it's just a matter of time and doing the right thing. So thank you. That was a great question. That was something that should have been in my talk.
Hi, you've been part of PyLadies. So how do you help someone?
What gave me away?
No, how do you help someone get starting with Python or any programming language? Like Python is your go-to choice, and from a totally non-coding background, like especially, you know, there is women at code, everything is there. It's just to increase the penetration of women. How do you help them?
So completely from outside of tech, how to get into programming. Start small, and it also depends, like, why do you want to get into programming? Do you want to switch jobs, and is that what your new career is going to be? Or is it just a hobby, or you have this one toy project that you want to do, or you want to program your vacuum cleaner? Like, all of these are valid reasons to get into tech, and they are completely different in how you need to approach them. Typically, attend a workshop or something like that there, and then keep trying, keep going. The most important thing is find a project that excites you, that is something that you want to do. It can be a complete throwaway, like I want to build the Tetris game or something like that, but something that you like, that you want to finish. Don't try to find like an arbitrary, like, I'll build Tetris because somebody else wants to. Like, that's not how you get into it. That's my one piece of advice. And talk to other people. Don't do it alone. Do it in a group. Find your local workshop, or if there's none, organize one. There's plenty of groups like PyLadies that will support you, that will help you, that will, if necessary, put a coach in a box and ship it over. Trust me, I've been there, and it's great. So find friends and find a project that excites you. Cool. We're out of time, so thank you very much for having me, and I'll be around for more questions.